I think I'm very fortunate to be from Tokyo and the art scene there because it's not as gatekeepy to meet people and it happened so organically. I remember going to the park and it was all Japanese kids and they would like run away, but I thought it was a game. But then after a while they started realizing like, oh, she's like from here. I think I was so like in my own world as a kid that I didn't realize. Only as an adult I look back and I'm like, oh, that was weird.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, subscribing is the best way to support us. It helps us grow and bring you new stories from life in Japan. All right, let's jump in. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Ameya in the studio. Thank you so much for coming.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. You're a director based in Tokyo. It's a city where you were born and grew up until you were about 8. And then you spent quite a bit of time abroad before deciding to move back about a decade ago to kind of build your creative career here. You've had the opportunity to do some amazing work, documentaries, commercials, and work with some people that others may very well know from the music scene and more. So we have plenty of things to talk about, but I'm curious a little bit about your upbringing. You are from, and I don't want to make a mistake, a Tamil and Telugu family.
Yeah, you got it.
Indian background, but you were born and raised in Tokyo. Tell me a little bit about how you experienced the city as a kid.
So I think for me as a kid, I was very fortunate I grew up in Setagaya and I grew up in Kamidonge, which is like, we grew up on the Dentoshi line, on the DT, we like to call it. But Yoga, Sakurashimachi, Fukutaka, Tomogawa, like they're all around like international schools. And I went to international school, so my neighborhood was like really diverse. Actually, like I was thinking about this today. I was like, we even had like trick-or-treating, which is the most like non-Japanese thing. But it's like we have enough like houses and like apartments where there's enough foreigners that people could like comfortably send their kids like trick-or-treating during Halloween. So yeah, that's what it was like for me. I grew up going to church every Sunday. I grew up like going to Kumo after school every week and then going to Konami. So I would say like half of my life was being in international school, being around like people from like all over the world, and then being in like Kumo and Konami and like just very Japanese environments. My parents were like very like wanted me to have like half and half exposure, and it's like, yeah, I never got like Nihongo Jozu growing up because people were so aware that there's all these like little like hafu and mixed kids and like foreign kids like me running around. And only when I became an adult did I realize like none of that was normal. Like we lived in like this little bubble almost, but yeah.
So I was actually going to ask, when you're a child and you are in these environments, you're just a kid, the others are just kids. You don't necessarily think about skin color or cultural background or language. You just, play outside together. So at what point did you start realizing that, okay, there's a certain cultural environment in your international school, a certain cultural environment at home, but then also you're in Japan and outside on the street in the city, that's a Japanese cultural environment?
I think like when I first started realizing it was, I think when you start becoming like 6, 7, 8, I would say. I think also girls mature a lot quicker, so then they're kind of more hyper aware of like their surroundings. And I remember going to the park and it was all Japanese kids and me, and some of them like wouldn't want to talk to me or like they would like run away, but I thought it was a game. Like I thought we were playing tag, so I would run after them, which probably scared them even more. But then after a while they started realizing like, oh, she's like from here, and so then they would come and talk to me more. I think that's when I started realizing like, oh, things are different. Or like when I was going like to swim school, we're categorized by like your age and how fast you can swim. So after a while, I like started to outswim my age group at like 7. So I was swimming against like 9, 10-year-olds. So they're obviously in like 5th grade, starting to come into like 10, 11, like 6th grade essentially. So they're a lot older. And I feel like that's when I started realizing like I'm different because they would treat me different. But I think I was so like in my own world as a kid that I didn't realize what was happening. Only as an adult, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was weird. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's actually the time when you started realizing this is also the time that you actually moved away from Japan.
Yeah.
How was it for you to suddenly leave this place that you grew up in behind and suddenly go overseas to the US, I think you went?
Well,
and completely different environment there.
So when I was 6, we went to Arkansas for 4 months, which like for people who may not know, Arkansas is like super like inaka of America. It's like not many people actually go there or from there. But first of all, I was like the smartest kid in class, which I'd never been, and I was good at math in America. And that was really like fun for me. The like supermarkets and everything was huge, humongous. And I'd never seen that much space in my life, especially coming from Tokyo. So I really liked it. And then we moved back to Japan for another few years. And then when I was 8.5, we moved to India for 2 years. That was like the first like big move that my family did. I think it was so interesting going from like a country where like less than 2% of the population looks like me to going to India where everyone looks like me. But internally, it felt really different. And like there's like in Japan, we have a huge middle class. So even if you grow up, like my family was upper middle class, like even if you grow up that way, it's more difficult as a child to see where money lies, if that makes sense. Whereas like in India, it's very apparent. People kind of wear their money a lot more, or they live in certain neighborhoods, or they don't, at that point, we didn't really have like a metro. Whereas like here, like it doesn't matter if you're like a millionaire or a billionaire, you're still going to take the train like everybody else. So I think there's less distinction in class. And I think that was like my biggest like culture shock, I would say, going from Japan to going to India.
Interesting. So not necessarily a culture shock in the sense of how people behave in what they do, but rather the visual impact of social classes.
Yeah.
And you were still a child there. So that's kind of a young age to suddenly realize and pick up on these things. You spent 2 years there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did it make you feel a little bit like, oh, this is a familiar environment? Not talking about the social classes, but then the cultural element? Because I imagine your parents growing up in Tokyo still kept some of the Indian culture at home, at least.
Yeah.
So moving there, was it for you a sort of way to reconnect a little bit with your family's background?
So my parents are South Indian and Mumbai is in North. So it was like very different. Already the language is different. My parents are really introverted, actually. So they really enjoyed being in Japan. Whereas like being in India, you're rewarded more if you're able to like have discussions and be able to debate people, which is kind of like similar to America in a way. And I wasn't used to that at all. And even now when I go back to India, I love it so much, but I struggle with being loud, because I think if you're speaking like Japanese for most of your life, or like, you know, when you speak English in Japan, we're used to being in quieter spaces. Whereas like in India, it's already like so loud. So you have to, your like normal voice is already at like a much louder tone than like most of the people in Japan. So for me, it sounds like I'm shouting, and I'm not used to that range.
You need to overpower all the tuk-tuks and the motorbikes that are driving past wherever the conversation is taking place.
Yeah.
Interesting. And 2 years in India, and then you move again.
Yes, to Singapore.
To Singapore.
Yeah.
You've moved a lot as a child.
I moved a lot as a child.
Was this something that for you became normal, or was it then difficult for you to kind of find a place that you'd call home, or find a place that you would find your comfort zone, so to say?
I think it was really difficult. I was very fortunate because I was very outgoing as a child. But I think it was like hard because most of the other people that I was around had grown up with each other for most of their life. So I'm always like the new character in like the 5th season of like someone else's life. So it feels weird being the guest character, and you know, you also kind of come with the energy that you're a guest and you're treated that way, and you know you're going to leave eventually. So I think that carries a different energy than like feeling settled in a space, you know.
Especially, I think what you just said, if you know you're going to leave already, it makes it difficult to really join these friend groups because you know that it's only going to be for a limited time.
Yeah.
When was a moment when you finally settled somewhere for longer?
I think when I lived in LA, when I went to high school in LA, and that was 4 years, and that was like the first time in like a very, very long time where I'd lived in a country for more than 2 years, I would say. Yeah.
And then after high school, you came back to Japan.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've been more or less settled here since.
Yeah.
How was it, or what was your perspectives after spending so much time abroad in so many different environments to come back to Japan, the country that you grew up in? You were saying earlier that you only realized certain things that were happening as a child when you came back as an adult. What was the impact of that move back here, your home basically, where you grew up?
Well, coming back as an adult, like you have to make your own money, right? And you're no longer living off of your parents. You're like kind of like a shakaijin, if you will, like a member of society. So I think that's like the first biggest gap. And then I would say the second thing is like having to work and understand how society views you in terms of working. I think it's already very, very difficult, no matter which young person you talk to anywhere in the world. Like the job market is tough. And applying to jobs is almost worse than dating because it's like people are just ghosting you for no reason and you don't know why. And so that was something I struggled with a lot, was initially like, how do I find my footing in this society? And what can I use that is already going for me to my advantage, and what things are working like against my advantage?
You just said something about realizing how society views you as a person. Is there a specific event or something that happened that
there were so many. Like, so, I think at that age when you're like 18, 19, like everyone applies for any job. You can get like low, high, whatever, like minimum wage jobs. And I love old people in Japan and I love talking to them. And usually they love talking to me. But I applied to like an old age home, essentially, to be like a caretaker.
Retirement home,
yeah. So I applied to a Ryojin home, and they were like, "You're gonna scare the old people because you're brown." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "How are you gonna be scared of me? What the hell did I do?" So things like that, where I was like, "Damn, I can't even get like a minimum wage job," and even like applying to like cafes or restaurants. Either they wanted you to be like really front of the house or they wanted you to be in the back. It depends like how they consider like their customer care and whether they felt like your appearance is going to add to how the customers view the restaurant, or if they don't want you to be seen at all by like their customers, so they're going to have you like doing the like trash duty or whatever. Yeah.
This is happening in the city that you were born in and grew up in.
Yeah.
And suddenly you, as a kid, for you, everything was normal. That's just, you have your friends here, you run around. Suddenly people tell you, no, we can't hire you because of how you look.
Yeah.
In the place where you were born and grew up. What do you think about in that moment? Do you kind of question the move back to Tokyo and think about, oh, is this a society where I can become a shakaijin, or is it maybe I should go back to LA or Singapore that are more international?
I never thought that there was any other option. I think that's the difference, right? Is like most people that come here wanted to move here, but it wasn't necessarily like a choice for me. So it's like you have no option but to make it work. Because it's like, if not in your home city that you're born in, where, And it was like still in like Setagaya, but like now I'd moved like to like Umegaoka at that time. And it was still really difficult, I would say. So that made me realize like, damn, I can be doing normal jobs. So I think because of that, actually, I was like, I need to start to create my own opportunities, because if I wait for opportunities to come to me, like I can't even be a dishwasher, which is so wild. Like now I think there's more opportunities, but if they're going to choose like an Indian guy or Indian girl, they're going to choose like probably a man to work in the back of the house because they're stronger, and that makes sense. me with my weak limbs, nobody wants that. Like, it doesn't make sense. So, yeah.
So you shift your mindset to, I'm going to stop applying for all of these jobs and I'm going to create something of my own. And you kind of pivoted a little bit to the creative field.
Yeah.
Did you have an interest in that world already before that? So you initially started, I think, in modeling.
Yeah.
Was it something like, I could become a model? Or was there an event that kind of got you interested into
Well, so at the time, I was doing like 4 or 5 different jobs where I was like, when I looked online and it was like, I think there was like some article where it was like jobs gaijins can do in Japan. And one was like teaching English, one was like modeling or like being an extra. And those were like the 2 main jobs that I saw keep coming up. So I did both. But even for teaching English, if you're not from, like if you don't have like a US citizenship or like a British citizenship, it's harder to get like an English teaching job. So I went on Craigslist and I was like, if anybody needs SAT tutoring, hit me up. And that's how I started getting like my first clients for tutoring English or like just like tutoring middle school and high school students. So I did that. And then I found like modeling jobs. And so I started doing that as well. And that was my first exposure to being on set because I didn't grow up with like parents that grew up in that industry or like I didn't really know people that work in that field at that time. And I think that was when I started getting like interested in it. But even then it was still just like baito. It was like, you know, one of the whatever jobs I can do to get new shoes or something like that. And that was it. Yeah.
It's interesting because in a way it's a transition from people rejecting you for how you look to you making money for how you look.
Yeah, exactly.
And of taking advantage of what people kind of refused you in a way. What was that experience like? Did you enjoy modeling?
I think some parts yes and some parts not really. For the most part, I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of people tend to have a really negative experience towards modeling. I think for me, I was very fortunate because I mostly got to work with eventually got to work with more brands or people that I knew. And so in that sense, it was really like fun for me. I think the only times I didn't like it was when I would get like typecast for something or like, I think a lot of like really big Japanese commercials, they just have like really weird stereotypes of like Indians or whatever have you.
For example?
Like just like trying to have like Indian people in like the 18th century and then the outfit is like really weird. And then there'll be like something between like having like an Indian accent but trying to sell curry but for like a perfume ad. And it's just like so many things happening.
Isn't there this weird ad for deodorant at the moment that's running where it's like, I don't want to say something wrong here, but it feels like they used a lot of these Indian stereotypes to create like a sort of set with like people around the main hero who then poses in the pose of an Indian god and then people put the deodorant on him.
I haven't seen that, but I'm not surprised. Yeah. But yeah, it was basically those kind of commercials, which I understand for like the genre of like Japanese cultures is more about like ogesa, like how big and bright and like almost like a caricature of everything can it be. But it does feed into how people like see you eventually. So I didn't want to do too much of that.
Yeah.
And then also like the interesting thing was like I was freelance modeling and a lot of the times I would be modeling with other people that were like in agencies. And so I would have to negotiate my own rates and then I would get to set and I would ask all the other like hafu models or the white models like how much they're making. And they make double what I was making. And I was like, what the heck? And so I'd have to go back and like argue, even though like I had to do more looks or like more photos than like anybody else because I was the only brown person there. And so they'd put me in as many things as possible so that they can look more diverse in a way. So I think it was more like the politics of modeling that I felt like was annoying. Yeah.
But what you got quite interested into is what's happening behind the cameras a little bit. Because now you're working as a director.
Yeah.
So what was it that got you curious about, okay, maybe I don't want to be the person in front of the camera, but maybe I want to start organizing. I want to start doing my own things. Because you didn't necessarily have that background either.
No. I didn't go to school for it either. Like I just went to the school of YouTube and how to do this, how to get proxies done, like all of that. how to color grade on DaVinci, and then you're crying. Like, yeah, that was my experience learning filmmaking. But for me, originally, I was studying economics in college in Japan, and my partner at that time was also studying economics. And at that time, I was kind of sad, and I wanted to start shooting photos. So I would go on like Medicari or like Craigslist and find like these old film cameras because they're like 2,000, 3,000 yen.
Yeah.
And at that time, film was like 1,200 yen gurai, so like 1,200 yen, which is really
feels like a
long
time ago.
now it's like impossible. Which is when you're making like minimum wage and you're working like 4 or 5 jobs, like it's a lot more reasonable to afford a film camera instead of the buy-in for like even like a Sony 6500 at the time was like at least Juman, like at least like around like $800, $900. That's a large lump sum. Whereas like film gave me the opportunity to start somewhere. And so I started doing that. And my partner at the time was like, you're never going to get anywhere with this. And I was so upset that they'd said that. And it wasn't even that I wanted to become a photographer at that time, but I hated more that someone would doubt me. But I'm not like an angry person. I'm not someone that likes to like yell back or anything like that. So I was like, okay, bet. And then I just like started shooting a lot of photos, and then I would hit up a lot of magazines and go to the very, very bottom of their website, and they'd be like, contact us. And I'd be like, hey, do you want some free photos from a 19-year-old in Japan? And they'd be like, yes.
Oh,
and
interesting.
That's how I started like becoming a photographer.
So started out as an editorial photographer.
Yeah.
How did it work? What were they looking for when you were doing those photos? Did you have something specific in mind? Like, okay, this is a fashion magazine. Maybe I can do these film photos of X and Y outfits, and maybe they want that? Or did you kind of have an idea of what was coming up in the next magazine and you tried to shoot specifically for them? How did you approach that?
I mean, I think because of the internet, like everyone needs like content, right? So it's like it's such a easy way to get your photos out there is to just like start by just shooting your shot. And for me, like to kind of answer your question, I think there was like 2 things. Like one, because I was still modeling, I was around these great sets and people that didn't mind being photographed all the time. And so like when we would have breaks, I'd be like, hey, can I like shoot some photos of you? And they'd be very down to like get their headshots done for free, essentially.
Yeah.
And I needed to understand how to do the lighting exposure with film anyways, because you can't see shit. You just have to hope to God that it's going to work out right. So it kind of built my muscle in that way. And so I would shoot like behind the scenes of like fashion shows and stuff like that while I was also like doing the runway. And then I would like give it to magazines. And then also I would do like editorial looks and like makeup looks on my friends, or I would find like people on Instagram and be like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think? And then if it looks good, I'll submit it to a magazine. And they'd be like, okay, sure.
You need to have a lot of drive to initiate all of these by yourself, right? Because it's not like someone is hiring you to begin with and paying you to do something. It's you who kind of wants to prove to yourself and to your partner at the time that you can do this.
I broke up with it. Yeah.
But you reaching out to all these people, finding them, the magazines, and kind of that takes a lot of initiative. Did you have like a goal in mind, or was it just to prove a point?
I just didn't want to fail. You know, I was just like, I don't care what it takes. But yeah. But I think eventually, and then from that, like, I would post pictures on Instagram. And for creatives, your Instagram is basically like your LinkedIn, if you will. And I think I'm very fortunate to be from Tokyo and to grow up in that scene and the art scene there, because it's not as gatekeepy as other cities are.
Interesting. How so?
So I think now it's changing because the scene has gotten so big and there's a lot more tourism. But when I was growing up, it was like you could go to anyone's party and like Kiko Mizuhara would be there for no reason at all. You know what I mean? And as long as you were going to a party on like a weekday, it was fine. And so if you follow like the right DJs or photographers or whoever, like they're very like open about where they are or what DJs they like or what parties they like. And it's not that exclusive. Like anyone can go to these things. And then when you're at these things, you'll meet people. They'll probably ask you like, hey, what's your Instagram? And then they see your Instagram. They're like, oh, you shoot photos, you do this. Da, da, da. Actually, I'm looking for this. And so from there, you just kind of like keep on going, if you will. So I feel very grateful to have grown up in that environment, because people are always like, oh, you should be networking, da, da, da. But what does that even mean? Like,
what does it mean? Networking?
Like, I think for me, it was like just a lot easier, because it's like you follow people that you have common interests with, and then you frequent the spaces that they go to, and it happens so organically and naturally. Whereas like, I don't think most cities like New York, London, LA have the same notion of like anyone who likes the same photos or the same music can be in any spot as you. I think there's more like a hierarchy of exclusivity there, which I feel like now I start to see in Tokyo, because there is so many more people.
You were just mentioning this is changing in Tokyo, and there's also a lot more tourism now. How is that affecting the scene? What kind of changes have you seen in the...
I think it's been good in terms of like music and culture, in the sense that everyone and anyone and their mom has all been to Japan in the past 2 years. I was so shocked when I went to like LA or New York last year, and every single place that I went to, there was like a table beside me that was like, oh yeah, you have to go to Osaka, like we just went there, da, da, da. I was like, what? Which is like 5-6 years ago, you would never go to like random places in America. Like even when I was in Idaho, there was like a table beside me that was like, oh yeah, we just got back from Tokyo, it was amazing. That wouldn't have never been a thing. Whereas like now it's like a huge thing. So people understand the context of like where I'm coming from. I think that's one thing. And then another thing is like, there is so much more interest in Japan and in Japanese culture, which I think is, I think it's like a double-edged sword, but I think it's a good thing, considering that like the population is declining. And I don't know, I think it's like a beautiful thing for people to want to come to the place that you're from, or to want to like visit and to like see a different way of living. Yeah.
How is that affecting the creative scene though? You were saying that it's there's not so much gatekeeping as maybe other places like New York, but it's changing now. So how are these changes kind of starting to put these gates in front of some of these entry points that you had when you started out with photography?
I think when I started off with like photography, it was more rare in a way. Not that anybody can't be a photographer, but now, because there's such a huge influx both in Japan and out of Japan of creatives, I think people can't decipher who's for real and who's not, which is what has probably happened in other cities. And I think because of that, there's more like gatekeeping of like, who's on the guest list, who's not, who do you know at this party, who do you not, why are you at this like magazine party, why are you at this brand event? Whereas like before it was like, oh, you're like a kid who has interest in photography, like you must be somebody. That's it. Yeah.
So you started out with photography, got your first photos published in magazines, but then eventually at some point switched to more like filmmaking and directing.
Yeah.
That's quite a big difference, a completely different field nearly in a way.
Yeah, you're going from 1 frame to like 24 frames per second. Yeah.
How did you get into that? What was the starting point there for you?
So as I would be going to these like parties in college, like also that was another thing, is I always went to these fucking artsy parties, whereas like most of the other kids around me would go to like A Life or like One Oak, which is like the very like clubbing places.
I see. Okay.
And at the like art parties, you'd meet like other people that were like the editors of XYZ magazine. And so from that, people would meet me, and then they would hear about me. And then someone from BuzzFeed reached out and slid into my DMs and was like, hey, we're looking for young people to work at BuzzFeed. Do you want to come apply? And I was like, sure. And so I applied to BuzzFeed, and then I was like interning as a video intern there. And I knew like some stuff about videos, like how to edit in Premiere and stuff like that. But I feel like anybody that's Gen Z now, it's like editing is your new writing, if you will. Everyone knows how to do it to some degree. So I was working at BuzzFeed, and that already like broadened my scope of like how to go from photo to video, because you're working in that medium all the time. And then from there, I did my first documentary, and it was about Ellen and her family. and basically pushing for same-sex marriage and trans rights in Japan. And initially, I brought that to BuzzFeed News, and the reporters were like kind of hesitant. They're like, I don't know what this story is supposed to be about. And then one of them, Sumireko Tomita, she took it upon herself to write about it. And then it broke national news, essentially in Japan, and it was on like Yahoo Japan, which a lot of people don't realize we still use Yahoo,
which is
in Japan,
the big platform here in Japan.
It's actually Yahoo Japan is BuzzFeed Japan's like sugar daddy, like their parent company, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were all in the same building, kind of. And so from that, upon reading the article, I kind of felt like when you read articles about people, you don't know if they're funny or not. You don't know if they're interesting or not. And Ellen and her family, they were just like this like really funny family to me. And they were also like a very similar age to me. So I thought, why not tell their story? And then I went back on Craigslist and I was like, does anybody know how to shoot video? And I found Debbie Sucha, who's actually a photographer, but she also like DPs a little bit. So she DP'd, and I got some friends from college. And then I realized and then they would ask me like, okay, how do you want this framed, or how do you want this done? And I realized like, oh, I'm directing. And I never intended for that to happen. It was just felt like intuitively this like need to do something. And that was the first time that I'd directed. Yeah.
The first time you direct, and a topic that is not easy
to direct God. Upon. Girl, so hard.
Which made it to national news. But I want to understand, what was your interest into that story? How did you first meet the family, and why did you decide to pitch that to BuzzFeed at the time as like your first documentary in a way?
Well, so I met that family through one of my friends, Arisa, who was also going to Aoyama Gakuen, and she told me that there's this story, and she knew I was working at BuzzFeed, and she knew their family was like kind of like fighting for their rights essentially, and so she was like, you should pitch this to BuzzFeed, and see if there's anything they can do with that. So that's how that started. Like I had nothing to do with the news. Like I was on the video team, and so we're making like food videos and like interviews and skits. Like it's all just like giggles, has nothing to do with like serious human rights essentially.
So for people that don't know the story, it's about an LGBTQ family. Just for context. Since I don't think we mentioned it so far.
Okay. Well, basically, like, so Ellen, she's a trans woman, and she was married to Midori, and they had 3 kids. And at that time in Japan, still to this day, you can't be a woman and be married to someone of the same gender. But she was already married from before her transition. And they had 3 kids. They were all boys. I think they were 8, 16, and 20 at that time. And so based on their case, because it was kind of a loophole in the system, also trans people weren't allowed to have kids. Based on their case, it could potentially push for same-sex rights marriage in Japan, and which is kind of like a landmark case, I would say. I found it really interesting, and I found Ellen really like funny, really extremely intelligent, actually. And I just thought, wouldn't it be nice for the world to see what I see? And that was it. Yeah.
How that made you realize you were directing for the first time when people that you brought in from Craigslist started asking you questions of how you want certain things filmed? I imagine the project wasn't easy. Took a little bit of time to set up.
Yes, and because it's a very nuanced case, you want to be able to get things right. You want to be able to have compassion, and because there were also like minors in it, right, and kids. Like, I never wanted for any of them to grow up and feel like they regret being in something. I wanted the family to feel very comfortable. That was my main prerogative more than anything. And yeah, I didn't realize like kids nowadays, like it's like mostly like you start with like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, like starting with Instagram or like skits or whatever have you. But That was like a 30-minute piece. And originally we had like 5-8 hours of footage. And initially I wanted it to be like a 5-10 minute piece, but I realized it's not possible to get the nuance of something like that under such a small like time frame essentially. So yeah, but then you can't fear what you don't know. So I didn't know it was gonna be hard. I was like, how hard can it be? And then boy did I find out. That was it.
But it was a successful documentary. It's still out there for people that are curious to watch this. And for you come out of there having directed your first documentary. Do you immediately start thinking like, oh, this was hard but fun and I want to do more? Or did you go back to what you were doing first at BuzzFeed, not thinking about it too much, and it took some time to ignite further the desire for you to direct?
Well, it came out years after me working at BuzzFeed, actually. After BuzzFeed, I had a video editing job during the pandemic, and I was also like shooting photos and modeling still. And I was actually very, very busy during 2020, 2021. I don't think I had any weekends off for most of those 2 years, actually. And then the documentary released, and then that broke news in its own way, and then it did well in like the film festival circuit and whatnot. And so people were like, oh, this 23-year-old director did this, this, and this. And I was like, who is that? And I was like, oh, that's me. So I think from there it started, and I realized like I love directing and I love doing documentaries, and I honestly just like love the way like things come together in a frame. I think it's like one of the most like magical things that can happen. It's like watching like an orchestra, and every single person adds a note to the music, and that's how it feels like being on set.
That's a very beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
For something that is sometimes, as you've experienced it for sure, very tiring, exhausting, long days, nights, early mornings, rainy days, lost film, broken camera, or whatever else may happen. But it sounds and it looks like an orchestra in the end.
Yeah.
You now work as an independent filmmaker, director.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked with the likes of Drake. You worked with models like
Rolla,
Rolla, and you've done commercials for big brands. That's like a huge transition from this independently produced small, if I may say small, documentary, which was your first one.
Yeah.
How did you get from there to there, so to say?
So I think, well, first of all, so I had my editing job, but it was like B2B. I quit my job. I reached out to all the ACs that I know, all the DPs that I know, and I said, please just let me on set. And I was like third ACing, which is like basically you're just supposed to move like C-stands and open C-stands. Girl, these C-stands are huge.
Yeah, we've got quite a few behind.
Yeah, they're so heavy as well. The DP was like, you're terrible at this. He was like, what do you really want to do? I was like, direct. He was like, just stick to that. And I was very, very fortunate where he got me my first gig, which is directing like a Google commercial. I had to pitch for it, but the energy that I pitched with was that I already had the job. So I wrote like a 10, 15 page deck where it was so like frame by frame, everything was so succinct that like by the time that they hired me, they're like, yeah, we already know what you're doing, if that makes sense. And I enjoyed pitching for commercials because going from like modeling and having to audition with your body, it feels almost unfair because there's no room for growth. It's like, okay, potentially you can get plastic surgery, you can lose weight or da-da-da. But there's nothing you can really do about the way you look. Whereas like with your directing, I was like, oh, I can audition with my mind. That's way better because you can tell me like, oh, this, that, and the third is shit. And I can grow from that. And I can figure out how to become a smarter, better person. But you can't figure out how to become a better looking person, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a relief in a way. And I was excited by that.
A commercial for Google, that's a big step. For a young and ambitious director.
Yeah. They were also scared, by the way.
But you said you approached it like you already had the job. So I imagine during the pitching process, you just focused like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. Suddenly they call you like, hey, now please film this. Is there then a realization that, oh, actually, no, it's not just an idea on paper. It's like I have to turn this into 24 frames per second for like however long this commercial is.
So for the Google commercial, it was like a documentary commercial. And it was also about like queer brands essentially in Japan. And so that was easier because it already felt like it was in my medium. And there's like a beauty of everything kind of coming together also in post, where it's like you let people breathe in front of you and you create the space kind of as you are, right? For them to be themselves. And then in post, you figure out how can I become a microphone to this person and amplify whatever they're already saying and make it more potent. So yeah, I didn't feel nervous. I actually felt the most myself that I'd ever felt. I was like, oh, this is what I'd been searching for. Yeah.
You've now, since that commercial with Google, worked on multiple projects. What were some of the ones that were very fun for you to do?
I feel like there's been so many fun ones. I've been so fortunate in my career. There's been really stressful ones. And then there's been ones that have been really fun. I would say the one we did for Drake was really funny because, so essentially like how that came about was one day I was online and if you follow like enough of people like in the industry, they'll be like, oh, we're looking for a hair and makeup artist or we're looking for like a DP or we're looking for a director. And one day I saw this ad that was like, oh, we're looking for directors to shoot a 1 minute music video for Party Next Door and Drake. And you can submit from anywhere in the world. So I asked my EP, Mike, at that time, I pushed like, do you mind if I apply for this? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I applied with like a very short deck, actually. I think it was just 9 pages or something like that. Because I knew for it being actually that big of an artist, I don't think they're going to sit here and actually read through most documents.
Yeah, probably not.
I think they're just going to vibe it out and see what they like. And my email to them was literally like, hi, this is a treatment from a girl in Tokyo. Enjoy EXO Ameya. And that was it. And that was my like headline as well. Kind of like if you're working in like the YouTube space, the thumbnail and the title is what you're going to see. Essentially, you can't, it's not like a book title. You can't be poetic about it. You just have to get right into it. So that's exactly what I did. And they replied and they're like, noted. And I was like, okay, so at least it went through. And then I think like 1 week before I was about to go to NYU, I get an email from like @drakerelated.com being like, you need to sign these NDAs. And I was like, me the who? Sign what NDA? And it was like, Shikamo was like @Drake related. I was like, anybody could be Drake related.
Yes,
how do I know?
Sounds like a fake email account.
Literally, you know those like DMs where it's like, oh, like Michael Jackson is suffering. Please send money. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was like, what if it's that? But I was like, and they kept sending emails, and I was like, okay, at least they're not asking me for money. So I signed the NDA, sent it back. And then the next day they were like, oh, congratulations. You're like one of the 20 directors that Drake's team has chosen or whatever to make this music video. And I was like, okay. So I think that was like one of my favorite shoots because it had nothing to do with documentary. It was like all just like fiction, essentially. It was like me, my friends, counting money in like bikinis and like my friend pole dancing. And then one of my friends like accidentally kills this guy. Essentially all like on a rooftop. I was just like, what is the wildest thing that can happen on like a Tokyo rooftop? And I put it all together.
And that turned into a music video for Drake. That's pretty cool how this kind of came to be.
Yeah, and it was like one take as well.
Wow.
So okay. My DP, Alex SR, he was really good. And we choreographed everything. And then we just did it in one take. And I was actually living in New York at that time. So I had to come back for 36 hours, shoot the music video, and then go back to school. Yeah.
School in New York and at NYU now.
Yeah.
Studying something also related to film and directing.
Not actually.
Not actually.
Yeah.
So what are you studying there?
I'm studying interactive media art. So it's basically, my understanding of it is the intersection of tech and art. So we do a lot of stuff with like Arduinos, with sensors, with like coding, except I feel like a lot of people now just vibe code. And then understanding how to express that in art. So I would think like team labs, like Ryojikeda, like that kind of work, and how does that come into place?
So creating interactive art spaces, exactly. Like you just brought up Team Lab. But that brings you back to the US in New York. I imagine that you kind of get in touch with the creative scene there too. Looking at your experience directing here in Japan and now kind of meeting the people in New York, where maybe you've also been directing some projects as well.
Yeah.
What kind of differences do you notice in how the whole production is being done in the two different cultural contexts or social contexts? For that
That's
matter?
A really good question. I realized how difficult it is to be a director in Japan after I went to America, because especially in New York, because it's also a city, right? We would be shooting on the train. And I remember we were doing this one scene shooting in between trains. So we would go between the carriages and we were shooting on film. People would literally like help open the doors or hold it open. Whereas like in Japan, if you're shooting on the train, you can't be shooting on the train, first of all.
You need the permits. And
you need permits, everything. Like, not to say in New York you don't, but people are a little bit more lenient. Like I remember I was shooting like a music video for this guy in my class. And he hopped into a construction site that says no trespassing. And I'm worried for my life. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get kicked out of the country. This is it, And the police come by and they're like, you're trespassing. You're not supposed to be in this space. And he was like, let me just get this shot and I'm going to leave. I swear. And the police officers go, okay, we're going to spin the block. If you guys are still here, we're going to say something. But if you get your shot in between us going around, then we didn't see anything. And I was like, okay, great.
Yeah, that won't happen in Japan.
They will never do that in Japan. So whereas like in Japan, there's so many more like rules. And there's like so many more old people, essentially.
In the scene, you mean?
In Japan.
Yeah.
Not just like in the scene, but it's like, say you want to shoot on like a street or like at a temple, and you're, even if you have like Beyonce or whoever, and you're like, I'm going to shoot this extremely famous American musician on the street. Do you mind if I shoot here at 7 p.m.? If some old person on that street is like, no, my bedtime is 5. His bedtime is 5, babes. That's it. That's all you can do. And you can be like, I will pay you $20,000, and they'll be like, my bedtime is 5. And that's it. And you can't convince this man of anything else, which like I almost respect in a way.
That also means that whenever we see something that is of high production value done here in Japan, and we understand the context that this was done in, that makes it even more unique in a way.
Yeah.
Because not everyone is able to go through all those hurdles of getting the permits, getting the man to move his bedtime from 5 to 7.
Exactly.
To get the shot with the sunset on the temple with Beyonce coming out of under the gate or something. So you realize how difficult it is here in Japan. Do you also notice like difference in like the structure and the way things work? From what I've heard you talk about so far, it seems like in Tokyo, at least, a lot of it is done on a sort of like freelance basis. The people know each other and they kind of come and help each other here and there on different shoots. Is it similar in New York, or is it more run by big production studios that kind of control or gatekeep the production?
I think in New York, it's like a bit of both, where it's like some agencies as well as like some freelance. And there's so many different levels to it, which I think is really interesting. And there's always someone somewhere that needs something. But I think on the higher levels, it definitely is like gatekept in a way. Whereas like in Japan, I think all of that, well, so especially for commercial industry in Japan, right? 90% to like 98%, I would say, goes to like Dentsu, Hokuhodo, like those really big commercial agencies in Japan. And then there's 2% of it that goes to smaller Japanese agencies or like more like bilingual agencies, I would say. And so that pool is a lot smaller, but I think because of the kind of like tourism that's been happening and like all these like artists and celebrities coming to Japan, that pool has now had more exciting opportunities than I think it's ever had before.
Because those outside forces are looking more for these independent thinkers, independent creators, rather than going with this very set and predefined way of doing that the large is interesting.
Yeah.
So where does that leave you now at the moment with what you're working on? You kind of started with photography, went into directing, and now you're kind of learning and studying these interactive arts and the combination of tech and arts. What are projects that you're currently working on that you're excited about?
Right now, I finished shooting 2 films last year, and so starting to put that both into like film festivals. One was about my life growing up in Japan, and another one was about these like short vignettes of like 2 girls in Japan and what their life is like during their 20s. So putting that into film festivals and seeing where it goes from there, as well as like doing some like upcoming music videos, both like in Japan and outside Japan, and graduating. I graduate in 2 months. Yeah.
2 months is very soon, so probably you will have graduated by the time this is out, actually.
Okay.
So congratulations to graduation. I'm curious about this first movie you just mentioned. So because I was actually thinking about asking whether starting to direct and filming others has made you want to reflect on yourself, and it seems like you have worked on that movie. When you decided to do something about yourself and your life and growing up in Japan, how did you decide to approach it?
Initially, like, I think because I live with myself, I'm not curious about myself, if that makes sense, because you're just yourself, you know? So I actually interviewed my grandma, and I asked her what her journey was like going to Japan, and what expectations she had and what expectations she wanted from me. And then that was kind of like the first part of the film, was understanding what it was like through her lens actually coming to Japan. And then cutting to like what my life is like today, and then what I foresee my life going like as well. Yeah.
So kind of starting with the family background and kind of through the generations.
Yeah.
You said that you didn't think about yourself too much because, we're just ourselves. Was it difficult for you to put that into introspection and find a way to film that and turn it into a film that you're now willing to share at festivals and put out there?
Yeah, because I mostly did it, A, for myself, and B, because I feel like I do get asked a lot of questions about who I am and what I am, essentially.
What you are.
Yeah. And I wanted to be able to define that on my own terms in some way, and in a way that I also find interesting. And I feel like I have like a very long life, long career ahead of me. And so I wanted to capture what my life was like at this point of time, so that I can kind of look back on that at some point. And I also felt like I've done so many documentaries on all kinds of people, from like billionaires to, craftsmen to monks, like so many different types of people. And sometimes some people aren't that interesting, I'm not gonna lie. But you have to find a way to make them interesting and be able to storytell, right? That's the craft of it all. And I was kind of like, if I poured the same energy into myself and I'm also already a willing participant in that, like how much more better or interesting could it be? So, yeah.
You mentioned some people are not that interesting.
I know. I think that's a controversial thing to say because people are always like, everyone has a story and everyone has a story, but does everyone want to hear it? I don't know.
And does everyone want to share their story?
Exactly.
It's a different challenge.
Yeah.
Which makes me curious about how do you approach these many documentaries that you've done? Are they usually pitched to you to direct, or are you seeking out those stories? How do they kind of all come to be?
I think for the past few years, it's mostly been people have come to me and asked me to direct. Yeah.
Interesting. So the power of starting by you first seeking out these magazines and these editorial shoots and reaching out to people on Instagram and building your own kind of work portfolio, and now is showing the results.
I had no idea that that's how
things work.
Yeah, or that's how that would go. I think now there's more of like a creator economy, right? And like a content creator economy and what that looks like. But back then we had no idea. I just knew that I wanted to follow my interests and I wanted to make something of myself. And my parents were always like, what are you going to do? How is this going to go? Da, da, da. It was only like last year that my dad found an article about the Drake music video. And he found my name on it. It was, I think, in like Rolling Stones or something like that. And it's like, you'd have to actually dig kind of deep. And around that time, I'd called him and I was like, oh, I have to do this music video for this guy named Drake. And he's like, oh yeah, Drake, I listen to his music in the gym sometimes. He's a big guy.
That's a funny way to put it.
Yeah, which is like the first time he'd ever said that. Because when I said I'd worked with like Japanese celebrities, he was like, who are these people? And I don't think my parents understood the world that I was working in, but I think now they have a lot more like trust. And initially they were very, very scared for a very long time. They're like, what the hell is happening? They're like, how does this make any money? Blah, blah, blah. But all they knew was I wasn't asking for money. So they were like, something somewhere is doing something and something is going right. But yeah.
But this is changing now a little bit in the sense that you mentioned there's a creator economy. So the way you've approached it might not be the way that it can be approached today.
Yes.
Do you think it's changed that significantly? If someone were to follow your path, so to say, that they could just go out and do the same way? Or has the economy and the way this works completely changed?
So I think even for myself, that's like something I've thought about a lot, right? Hence me going to grad school is essentially, I think the path of being a director today is to create an ecosystem of a world. I don't think it's the same as like Martin Scorsese's era, where it's like, okay, you create for like 2 by 35 by 1, you're just creating for that one aspect ratio. You have everyone locked in for 2 hours minimum in a box, essentially, with relatively okay seating. That is not the environment that we're living in. Like, for me, whether I'm creating for like brands or whether I'm creating for like music videos or artists, oftentimes the amount of deliverables that we have is a lot larger than it ever was before. You're having to create 16 by 9, like 1 by 1, 9 by 16, 3 by 4, plus the podcast, plus the thumbnails, plus the UX, UI. So I think in today's world, as a director, you're having to create a whole ecosystem. And that ecosystem is constantly changing. But what's the same is like your creative sensibilities and your taste and having a pulse on where is the market today? Where is your artist or your brand today? How are you moving that needle forward? And how are you going to express that in literally every medium possible? And I think that's more the bigger challenge that creatives are having to face today. Whether you're a director or like a model, or if you're doing like a podcast, like you also have to create in so many different formats. So I think it's more about that and the strength of that and having brand cohesion amidst all of that.
You worked with a lot of like foreign brands, but in the Japanese, for the Japanese market. How do you have to approach these cultural sensitivities when you do a campaign for Dickies or whatnot, but like for the Japanese markets? Because the brand's values might be conveyed in different ways when you apply them in a Japanese cultural context. Is this also something that's changing that you have to constantly kind of think about?
I mean, I think anybody that's had to work for like a global brand, whether you're working at like Google, Nike, Dickies, in-house or at an agency or you're freelancing, like the main pain point is, so there's like 3 kind of divisions of it, right? Is like, A, what are the global campaigns that are happening? B, what gets funneled down to the APAC region, right? And APAC region includes Southeast Asia and Australia. They're already so vastly different. And then the third is creating for Japan. So by the time it trickles down, you're having to think about all the nuances of how did this all translate in all of those places, and then how are you going to translate to Japan? I think, one, there's the discrepancy of like, how diverse is something going to be? How much risk is the brand willing to take? That's your first discrepancy. The second is who's going to be in it? How much charm or charisma do they have? And how do you find the right balance of taking the allure of like a global brand like Dickies and translating it to a Japanese audience? What are the things that you think are interesting? And what do you think that Japanese people think is interesting or that they respect? Because I think a lot of brand value in Japan is based on respect, right? It's based on durability. It's based on, do I really want to invest my hard-earned money into a brand? Because we have a lot less purchasing power. I would say young people have way less purchasing power than people do in other countries, in other cities especially. And so if I'm going to spend the very little disposable income that I have on a brand, why? How? Who does that make me? And who am I aligning myself with? Yeah.
So a lot of questions for you to think about as a director in this kind of changing environment with the requirements of the industry, the requirements of the people you're making the videos for. And for you, that means kind of continuously renewing yourself and your work and how you approach it. You work on a lot of music videos. You're about to graduate or have just graduated, depending on the timeline that we're doing this in. What are the kind of projects you would love to work on? Do you have any sort of, I would like to make a full feature film in the future in Japan. I would like to make this big high-value production documentary. What are you striving for now?
I think eventually I want to do TV and TV shows. Probably like limited series or like a couple seasons of something would be fun. I think, and then on the flip side of that is to like be able to build like physical exhibition spaces and physical worlds that people can enter and enjoy, especially because I feel like there's this like growing digital fatigue of people like quitting social media and only doing YouTube or only consuming YouTube. So how can people be entertained in a safe way? How can people grow empathy for people outside of themselves? And what does that look like if it's not just in like a 9:16 frame?
It looks like a cool place, like something like Team Lab, where people can reconnect and interact with each other and with the environment in maybe new ways that we haven't really thought about before. Sounds like you've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Ameya, we talked about quite a lot of things. Is there anything in particular that maybe I didn't ask you about that you would have liked to bring up today that we can still get into?
Yeah, I think I am like curious about like confidence and where that comes from. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in Japan we're not taught confidence the same way that people in America are taught, which is not a bad thing. I think confidence in Japan is based on competence.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you need to put your 10,000 hours into just making the rice of a sushi before you make the sushi.
So I know I told you before the podcast that I don't want to challenge you, but then you didn't have the 10,000 hours when you pitched your Google commercial.
Yeah.
How did you get the confidence to put
because
that forward?
I was like, I thought about it from like the client side. Like if they were to hire me, what is it that they need to know that they wouldn't have any questions? How can I make sure that I think about every single thing and every single frame and every single problem? And then once you've thought about the 2,000 problems that could go wrong and how to solve that, then that builds some amount of competence where it's like, okay, at least I've thought about this. But even then, sometimes like I've thought about like plan A to G for a commercial and plan like Z happened. It's just like, who thought about that? Like, things like that. Yeah.
So in Japan, confidence comes from competence.
Yes.
And how is that different than from the other places that you kind of grew up in and have experienced or reflected on that?
I think what I realized in America, they really reward being able to talk and being able to be someone of like charisma, charm, and being able to debate. We in Japan don't have a lot of room for debate because there's already a hierarchy on who can ask questions and who's even allowed to voice their opinions in certain rooms. Whereas like in America, I feel like there was like less of that. And a lot of it is based on like how confident someone is in themselves and the articulation of themselves. And I think that comes at a lot earlier age in America than it does in Japan, which I feel very grateful to have like experienced that in my high school because we had like speech and debate. So we'd have to get up and do these 10, 15-minute speeches every weekend. Or if you're on debate, you're having to debate people all the time. And another thing that I found really interesting about being in America is they compliment people for no reason at all. Like when I'm walking, I've like walked all over, right? Like I'll be in like Arkansas, Idaho, Utah, Montana, Seattle, Arizona, New York, LA. Like there's never been a week in my life where I've been in any city in America where someone doesn't randomly shout at you and they go, your outfit is amazing. Or like, oh, you're so pretty, da da da. And it can be from anyone. Even like a lot of women will like randomly compliment you. I'll never forget, like I was on the phone with my mom once, just on the street. And some girl was on the phone and she was like, your top is really cute. And then she just kept walking. And I was like, oh, damn, she didn't even want to be my friend. She just wanted to say that. And I think that it's actually a very healthy environment to be in where it's like you're rewarded for being confident. You're rewarded for, it's not even like you need to look pretty or something like that. It's like it can be so random. But if you're tapped into yourself, people will like actually appreciate that in a way. Not to say that people don't compliment in Japan. I think it just happens more in like closer proximity.
After
I would
you've
say.
broken the first wall, so to say. Gotten into the person's personal environment.
Yeah. Like sometimes I'll compliment random people in Japan and I feel like I scare them. I'll be like, oh, neil kawaii ne. And they'll be like, And I'm like, what? Wait, did I say something wrong? But yeah.
You wanted to bring up this topic of confidence and like the way people compliment people in the States and how different it is between both countries. Why is that important to you, and how do you feel like it's maybe shaping your perspectives of working here in Japan?
I think especially for women, it's really important because I think I have friends from anywhere between like their early 20s all the way up into their late 40s, right? And I've noticed women, especially Japanese women in Japan, are more confident from the later half of their 20s into their 30s and 40s, and are more like articulate. And I think when you're in your early 20s or in your late teens in Japan, no one's asking you for your opinions on anything. No one is curious about your worldviews or what you like or what you dislike. They might be curious about like what you like to eat or what you don't like to eat or like your fashion sense or da-da-da, but they're not necessarily curious about like how do you view the world. Whereas like that's already such a heavy topic in America by the time you hit 18 because you're having to vote. So who you, what your political views are, all those things come into play, and it's like a very normal scope of discussion. Whereas like I feel like that's not as normal in Japan. And I feel like more young people would be in positions of power or would take up more of like sort of like the market space, if you will, if they were more vocal about how they view the world and how they view the country and where it's going.
Since you're from this kind of creative field, and especially, let's say, video production that also then is visible on social media and these kind of platforms, Do you feel like they are changing that a little bit, in the sense that, if you're in a room with people that are your senior, you might not be asked for your opinion here in Japan, depending on the context. But on social media, you have your own platform, you can have your own voice. Is that kind of changing this dynamics a little bit?
I think a little bit, but not a lot of it.
Oh, interesting.
Because I think if you're working like a computer science job, the likelihood that you're going to post on Instagram is less. The likelihood that you're going to post on Twitter is higher. Whereas like most people on Twitter tend to not have their faces, and then they tend to talk about like their views on the economy or so on and so forth, or AI or whatever have you. So there's like a wall that you're more used to hiding behind.
Your social context might influence your social platform in a way. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Of course, there's like some like anomalies. Like I've seen people that are like software engineers and go on to be like content creators from there. But I think it's a bit more rare. But I think it's necessary, one, because I don't think we live in a time where most people can have like one source of income, right? It tends to be, most people tend to have two sources of income or so on and so forth. And I think also because of the amount of tourism that's happening in Japan, there is like a more, I don't know the right English word for it, but there's more animosity, if you will, towards how many tourists are coming to Japan, which I think it's also important, vice versa, for people from Japan to be able to leave and to go see the world and see how other countries exist and what they do and what they like about those countries or not, or how their economies are, what their social policies are, and bring back whatever they want from those experiences to Japan. But I think that's a lot rarer, one, because the yen is really weak, and two, it's very, very expensive to leave Japan. As a Japanese person, it's extremely expensive. Whereas like for me, what I've experienced is I've very rarely gone through racism from people between the ages of like 60 to 90.
Okay.
Especially like 70 to 90 or like 90 plus, because a lot of them were able to leave Japan. A lot of them spent time in their like 30s, 20s, 40s, going to India, Singapore, America, UK.
Hawaii.
Yeah, because they were like living in like the Boda Jidai, right?
Yeah.
So they've seen the world. So when they speak to me, they're just glad I can speak Japanese. And they're so excited actually to talk about newspapers or like whatever is happening in the world and what do I think and what do they think. And sometimes they have really conservative opinions, but they're happy to have a conversation. And they're just so gassed, and I've never like experienced them being like very harsh or mean to me if they've like actually had a conversation. And oftentimes like old people even like come up to me on the streets and they'll talk to me because they'll hear me speak Japanese like at like 7-Eleven or something and order something, and they'll be like, oh, she speaks Japanese. Boom, they come up to me, they, and I'm like, oh, like, and from there we have a conversation. And that made me think, like, why is it that I've never experienced racism from old people in Japan? And I think it's a problem of exposure more than it is about anything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's interesting, too, because you mentioned before how, we talked about the confidence and we talked about people being asked for their opinions or not, and especially maybe younger people not being asked. But it seems like when you skip that generation, you go to the older generation and you're not in that context, they are interested in your opinion.
So interested.
They're interested.
They're so
when
curious.
They see there's no barrier. So it seems like everything is kind of a very complex social construct.
Yeah.
Some of which you seem to want to tackle a little bit and see some change in, maybe through some documentary or some research, or through creating experiences that could bring people or break down the walls and give people a space that they can share. Do you think this is something that's going to change, or is it something that's going to take a long time, or how would you like to see that change?
Which change? All of it?
Well, all of it, but mostly this kind of, you mentioned that people need to go outside. They need to see different cultures, experience different cultures, so they can reflect and maybe break down some of these walls that are preventing some people to express themselves properly here.
I mean, I think like at the end of the day, we all have to breathe the same air, essentially. And it needs to be breathable air, and it needs to be air that we can all share. And I think that's like sort of the minimum variable that we're supposed to be afforded in this lifetime, and for it to be like affordable in a way. And I think anything that all of us are able to do towards that goal is important, you know, even though we all live in like our own rhythm of life. Especially when you're living in a city, it's so obvious that at any given point you're coming into contact with like 100 to 200 to 300 people. Like every time you go on a train, there's so many people on that train. But, you know, over time you kind of get used to that, and you forget that you're on a train with a bunch of strangers, essentially. Like, obviously that's why there's like a high amount of like caring about how to live in like a society together, in terms of like, you know, like keeping your backpack in the front and like those kind of customs. But what's like not afforded to us in the same way is like, how do we live together in terms of like our value system, or like our ecosystem of the mind, and then of where our money and taxes are going to, you know?
Very kind of complex social matter.
It is, yeah.
I think we could be discussing this for a long time, and maybe that is a kind of project that you could work on as a director, to see how that can be conveyed to people, to lead to interesting conversations, because I think the most important is that those conversations happen.
I agree.
And they may not always be happening, so people need a space to converse, a reason, a topic to converse, perspectives to debate, and then maybe some of this change will happen little by little. But overall, Japan's a pretty good place to be in and to.
I think my favorite thing about Japan is I'm so glad I came up in my 20s in this country and in this city. One, because there's like I said before, there was less gatekeeping, but you know, you can say what's the worst that can happen a lot easier here than I could in most other big metropolitan cities. Because even at my worst, like even when I was like so broke, I had like 3,000 yen left in my bank account. So I was like, okay, I can order one Domino's pizza and eat that for the week. Or like sometimes I would have call times at like 7 a.m., 7 or 8 a.m. And I didn't want to go through rush hour. So I would go much earlier. Like I would take like first train sometimes around like 4 or 5 a.m. or so. And then I would like sleep actually in like random staircases in apartments. But I know I can do that because I know it's safe. I know it's my home country. I know how to navigate that without being like annoying, and you find enough like abandoned buildings. So it's like even if I had to be homeless, I wouldn't be scared to do that. Even if I had to be broke, I'm not scared to do that, because the society is set up in a way that it can hold you through that. Whereas like most other societies, there is no floor on how bad things can get. Like most parts of America, you're one health injury away from like shit hitting the fan, you know? Same with like a lot of Europe, I would say. And with India as well. Whereas like I wasn't scared to be on like the lowest levels of like the economy or like poverty, I would say. Yeah.
I think listening to your entire story today, this is kind of the mantra that I see. You kind of wanted to prove something for yourself, and were fearless in your approach to let's just try something. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah. And I think throughout everything you've shared, that kind of comes through. And Japan is a place where you can do this. So I think maybe the message for people would be to be ambitious and not shy away from just trying new things, experimenting, and sharing their voices out there. Ameya, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you as well.
It was a real pleasure having you here, getting to talk and hear your perspectives and thoughts on these topics. I'm sure we could go much more, and we might meet very soon to continue that conversation. Who knows? Thank you for making time.
Of course, thanks for having me. And also thank you for making spaces like this. I think it's really important. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Cool. What a journey you've been on. That's crazy. Yeah. Thank you for sticking with us all the way till the end. We really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the podcast. It helps us improve the show and bring you more in-depth conversations from Japan. Take care and see you next time.